Think about this statement. In order to ask a question, you must first know what to ask. We are constantly driven by things that we seek to answer. We are encouraged to follow our dreams, accomplish our goals, and find answers to what our purpose may be. There are endless resources in every form imaginable that help us answer these things, and of course, some people become really famous for their ability to provide answers to questions and goals we already have. But often, what isn't addressed is something more fundamental. Knowing what it is that you seek to answer. While this isn't exactly brand new knowledge, in my experience, this is a lacking part of our general thinking. We are so focused on answering questions, goals, or objectives, we forget that before we do that, we need to know what it is that we seek to answer. And when we don't know, this can be even more challenging. Think about it this way. Ignoring nuances for a moment, at first glance, we can think of our relation to all knowledge in two categories: what we know and what we don't know. But if we examine this more closely, we actually see that this splits into three categories. Take Donald Rumsfeld's famous quote.
There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know we don't know.
The way I see it, we most often focus on converting what we know we don't know to things we know we do know. Or in other words, the process of answering the question. But there's a whole other side to this, converting what we know we don't know out of what we don't know, or the process of forming the question. I'd argue that true lack of direction stems from a lack of awareness of this more fundamental aspect. But what do I mean by a question? In this video, I'm taking a very expansive sense of that concept and looking at it as something which needs to be answered or fulfilled in some way. I do this because more generally I'm addressing the reality that we need to have a known unknown before it becomes a known known. This is true for questions, objectives, goals, and even dreams. Put it this way. How can you follow your dreams if you don't know what your dreams are? While not being able to accomplish your goals can be quite defeating, it can be even worse to not even have goals to start with. It was only recently in my life that I realized the importance of knowing what to ask. In the past year, I've experienced a lot of change in my life. I graduated with my master's in music and moved from this academic phase into a more professional one post-graduation. For the first time in my life, this meant that I had a wider horizon in terms of discovering goals to strive for, dreams to follow, and questions to answer. My reality changed from having a direction to not even knowing what direction to take, even as I live here now in Pittsburgh with a full-time job. The weight of the unknown can be quite devastating, and it's hard to know what to do after that. However, in my experience, I've also discovered that there are ways to remedy this and find direction out of seemingly nothing and unknown. The answer is experience. So, what do? How do we even figure out that there is a question to be asked or a goal to be set in the first place? It might help to reframe this a little bit, so let's go back to the opening statement of the video. In order to ask a question, you must first know what to ask. Now this is important, but this isn't the very first step, Instead, let's take a step back. In order to know what to ask, you must know that there is something that is to be asked. Meaning, you have to know that you need to figure out a question to ask. The known unknown is the known unknown. Many of us have been in that situation where we make a mistake and another person says, "Well, why didn't you ask?" When the truth was that we didn't know we had to ask, or we didn't realize anything was wrong. If you don't realize that you need to ask the question to begin with, you can't even start the process of formulating one. Now, this may actually be the first step to moving from an unknown unknown to a known unknown. That is to say, realizing that there is a question to be asked or a goal to be set, even if you don't know what that will be. You might be confused, but bear with me. You may be thinking, if the question is an unknown unknown, how are we supposed to realize that we need to formulate it? Let's take our statement back one more step. In order to know that there is something that is to be asked, you must put yourself in a position to realize the unknown. So, how do we put ourselves in a position to realize that a question needs to be asked? Or in other words, how do we put ourselves in a position to realize the unknown unknown? Well, I find that we do this very naturally, even if we don't realize it. The simplest way I can explain it is that we use what is innate and foster it through life experiences. By innate, I mean tools of discovery that we are all given upon childhood, such as our curiosity, our senses, our intellect, and even our instincts, among other things that we all have. This is something I learned more directly through my master's degree when I was writing for my master's thesis. I started out my degree not knowing what my research would cover and not even knowing where to start. Fortunately, I had a professor who advised me that I just need to go out and explore different things and explore what interests me. He said to write about what makes me curious and what piques my interest, and from there, research questions would very naturally flow, which would lead eventually to prose that I could use for my thesis. I found that he was correct, and eventually I was able to complete this thesis, but it started from a place where I didn't know what I didn't know. Behind me, the tall building in the background, is the Pittsburgh Cathedral of Learning, and to the left in the screen is Phipps Botanical Garden and Conservatory. I highly recommend either of these two places to visit should you visit Pittsburgh, but there are also many other wonderful places in this city. But just like these two places and any others, any experience you have is a chance to explore into the unknown unknown, using, once again, these tools of discovery. One of my dearest teachers always told me that you are no greater than your life experience. I take that to be true in formulating questions. As we get older, the stakes become greater, circumstances become more complex, to where not having a question or goal, or even having the wrong question or goal, leads to more significant consequences. Even the same question in these two different circumstances carries drastically different implications. What leads a child to ask, "What do I do?" is much different from what leads an adult to ask, "What do I do?" As adults, we develop significant advantages to formulating questions or goals. Through increased capacity for rationality and curiosity, we can harness even more from our innate tools of discovery. We can become more in tune with our minds and bodies. But what's common among people of any age is that they only formulate these things in relation to their life experiences. Take J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the movie adaptation Part 2. In it, Helena Ravenclaw has a very famous quote where she tells Harry, "If you have to ask, you'll never know. If you know, you need only ask." Basically, the quote says that some things can only be answered by you and yourself alone. You have to know what to ask before you can seek help answering the question, because there are some questions that only you can formulate for yourself. Whether we realize it or not, experience teaches us what to ask. Every single day, we go through different experiences that push us a little further into the territory of our unknown unknowns, and ultimately to a place of discovering new questions that need to be answered. We push deeper into the learning paradox, which Einstein famously described by saying, "The more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know." Well, this is exactly my point. We realize more things we don't know as we answer more questions and gain more knowledge. There's no simple path to discovering what questions or objectives we must answer, but there's no substitute for experience in this regard. The more we go out and do things, read, become vulnerable, use our senses, the more we put ourselves out there and experience life, the more questions we will find. We can't control what these questions are all the time, but the point is we must put ourselves in a position for them to come to us. The point of this video is to remind us of the reality that in order to answer something, we must first know what to ask. This applies to our questions, our goals, our objectives, and even things as large and grand as our dreams. Just like my previous video titled More Than Passion, the ideas that inspired this video stemmed primarily from my own experiences now as a young professional within the arts. What experience has taught me is that while not having an answer to a question or being able to meet a goal can be devastating, not being able to form a question or a goal can be even worse, and to realize this takes awareness, humility, and vulnerability. We must know what is unknown before making it known. And venturing into the territory of the unknown unknowns is something that we do through experience, using a range of resources ranging from other people to things that are more innate, such as our own curiosity. With that being said, I hope that this video is a resource for you if this is something that you relate to. Let me finish by asking you a question. Before you attempt to answer something, how do you know what to ask?